The First World War, also known as the Great War, began in 1914. It was sparked by the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary. What started as a seemingly localized conflict quickly escalated into a global war. Countries across the world were drawn into the conflict, forming alliances and mobilizing their armies. The world watched in disbelief as Europe descended into chaos. The scale of the war was unprecedented. Millions of soldiers were mobilized from across the globe. They were sent to fight in a conflict that would claim millions of lives. The war was marked by its brutality and technological advancements that made it deadlier than any previous conflict. Traditional warfare tactics proved ineffective in the face of machine guns, poison gas, and heavy artillery. The Great War was a conflict unlike any other, marked by its sheer scale and the horrors that unfolded on its battlefields. It left an indelible mark on the world, shaping the course of the 20th century and beyond. The war's legacy continues to resonate today, serving as a reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of diplomacy. It also highlighted the interconnectedness of the world and the devastating consequences of unchecked nationalism and militarism. The Western Front, stretching across France and Belgium, became synonymous with trench warfare. This new form of warfare emerged as both sides dug into defensive positions to escape the deadly firepower of machine guns and artillery. Trenches, elaborate systems of ditches, barbed wire, and fortifications dominated the landscape. Soldiers on both sides faced unimaginable conditions, living in constant fear, surrounded by mud, disease, and the constant threat of death. Life in the trenches was a horrific ordeal. Soldiers endured cramped and unsanitary conditions, often exposed to the elements and enemy fire. Disease was rampant, claiming as many lives as combat itself. Rats, lice, and trenchfoot were constant companions. The psychological toll was immense, with soldiers suffering from shell shock, now known as post-traumatic stress disorder. The stalemate of trench warfare led to some of the deadliest battles in history. The Battle of the Somme, for example, lasted for over 4 months in 1916. It resulted in over 1 million casualties for both sides. The Battle of Verdun, another infamous clash, lasted even longer, from February to December 1916, and claimed an estimated 700,000 lives. These battles exemplified the brutality and futility of trench warfare, where gains were measured in yards and lives were expended with little to show for it. The First World War witnessed an unprecedented development and deployment of new technologies. These advancements transformed warfare, making it more deadly and destructive. The machine gun, for example, became a defining weapon of the war. Its rapid fire could mow down attacking troops with ease, making frontal assaults costly and often futile. Another technological innovation that had a significant impact was poison gas. First used by the Germans in 1915, poison gas introduced a new level of terror to the battlefield. Chlorine gas, mustard gas, and other chemical weapons caused excruciating burns, blindness, and agonizing deaths. Soldiers were forced to wear rudimentary gas masks, which offered limited protection and added to the psychological strain of combat. The war also saw the introduction of tanks and airplanes. Tanks, heavily armored vehicles designed to break through enemy lines, were first deployed by the British in 1916. While their initial impact was limited, tanks would go on to play a decisive role in future conflicts. Airplanes, initially used for reconnaissance, quickly evolved into weapons of war. Dogfights between fighter planes captured the imagination, and bombing raids added a new dimension to warfare, bringing the horrors of conflict to civilian populations far from the front lines. While the Western Front remained the central theater of war, the conflict spread far beyond Europe, engulfing much of the world. The Ottoman Empire, allied with Germany and Austria-Hungary, controlled vital sea lanes. These sea lanes threatened British access to its colonies in India and the Far East. The Gallipoli campaign, launched by the Allies in 1915, aimed to capture the Dardanelles Strait and knock the Ottoman Empire out of the war. The campaign proved to be a costly failure for the Allies, resulting in heavy casualties for both sides, particularly for the Australian and New Zealand forces. The Gallipoli campaign had a profound impact on the national identities of Australia and New Zealand, where it is still remembered as a symbol of both sacrifice and the horrors of war. The war also spread to Africa, the Middle East, and Asia. In Africa, British, French, and German colonial forces clashed, drawing local populations into the conflict. The Middle East witnessed the Arab revolt against Ottoman rule, fueled by the promise of independence. Japan, allied with Britain, seized German colonies in China and the Pacific, expanding its influence in the region. The United States, initially neutral, entered the war in 1917 after German submarine attacks on American ships. The entry of the United States, with its vast industrial and military might, tipped the balance in favor of the Allies. Section 5. The Crumbling of Empires, a New World Order. The First World War led to the collapse of four empires: the Russian Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and the German Empire. The Russian Empire, already weakened by internal strife and economic woes, succumbed to revolution in 1917. The Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, seized power, promising peace, bread, and land. Russia's exit from the war allowed Germany to focus its forces on the Western Front, but it also marked the beginning of a new ideological struggle between communism and the capitalist West. The Ottoman Empire, once a formidable power, crumbled under the weight of its own internal contradictions and the pressure of war. The Armenian Genocide, a systematic extermination of the Armenian population within the Ottoman Empire, stands as a horrific testament to the war's brutality. The end of the Ottoman Empire led to the creation of new nation-states in the Middle East, but it also sowed the seeds of future conflicts. The Austro-Hungarian Empire, a patchwork of different nationalities and ethnicities, disintegrated under the strain of war. Nationalist aspirations, suppressed for decades, resurfaced with a vengeance. The empire was broken up into several independent states, including Austria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and Yugoslavia. The German Empire, defeated and humiliated, was forced to accept blame for the war and pay heavy reparations. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in 1919, officially ended the war, but imposed harsh terms on Germany, fueling resentment and contributing to the rise of extremism in the years that followed. Section 6. Armistice, a fragile peace. The armistice, signed on November 11, 1918, brought an end to the fighting on the Western Front. The guns fell silent after more than 4 years of devastating warfare. The world rejoiced at the news, relieved that the bloodshed was finally over. However, the peace that followed was fragile and imperfect. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to prevent future wars, created new tensions and resentments that would contribute to the outbreak of World War II just 2 decades later. The war's end ushered in a period of profound change and uncertainty. Millions of soldiers returned home, physically and emotionally scarred by their experiences. The world struggled to come to terms with the unprecedented loss of life and the social, political, and economic upheaval that followed. Women, who had played a vital role in the war effort, began to demand greater rights and opportunities. The war also accelerated the decline of Europe as the world's dominant power. The United States emerged from the conflict as a global player, while countries like Japan and China saw their influence grow. The seeds of decolonization were sown as colonies that had contributed to the war effort began to question the legitimacy of European rule. Section 7. The Enduring Legacy, Scars of War. The First World War left an enduring legacy, shaping the 20th century and beyond. The war's impact extended far beyond the battlefields, transforming societies, economies, and the international order. One of the most profound consequences of the war was the loss of life on an unprecedented scale. Millions perished, leaving behind grieving families and a generation forever marked by the conflict. The war also had a profound impact on the political landscape of Europe and the world. The collapse of empires and the redrawing of borders created new states and reignited old rivalries. The Treaty of Versailles, while intended to ensure peace, sowed the seeds of future conflicts by imposing harsh penalties on Germany and failing to address the underlying causes of the war. The war also led to significant social and cultural changes. Women, who had taken on new roles during the war, began to challenge traditional gender norms, leading to advancements in women's rights. The war also exposed the horrors of modern warfare, leading to a growing pacifist movement and a search for new ways to prevent future conflicts. The League of Nations, established in 1920, represented an early attempt at international cooperation and collective security, though its ultimate failure highlighted the challenges of maintaining peace in a world still grappling with the legacies of war. Section 8. The Importance of Peace Lessons from the Abyss. The First World War stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict and the importance of diplomacy, dialogue, and understanding in international relations. The lessons learned from the Great War remain as relevant today as they were a century ago. The rise of nationalism, the dangers of unchecked militarism, and the importance of international cooperation are all themes that resonate deeply in the 21st century. The First World War demonstrated the devastating consequences of unchecked nationalism and the pursuit of narrow self-interests. It highlighted the need for international cooperation and the peaceful resolution of disputes. The failure of the League of Nations underscored the challenges of building a lasting peace, but also reinforced the importance of continued efforts to foster dialogue, understanding, and respect between nations. As we remember the First World War and the millions who perished, we must also remember the lessons learned from that terrible conflict. The pursuit of peace, the rejection of violence, and the importance of diplomacy are not merely ideals, but essential principles for a world striving to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past. The echoes of war should serve as a constant reminder of the fragility of peace and the need to work tirelessly to create a more just, equitable, and peaceful world for all.